There is an incurable disease called Settle-Carlitis. It is highly infectious. Whenever a sufferer hears the toot of a locomotive whistle, he loses his awareness of immediate surroundings and dreams about the railway that men built across the Pennines. The Settle-Carlisle Railway must surely mean something to most of us, maybe only the vague recall of news headlines to some, but for others it is a burning issue. In May 1989, after a 6-year battle to prevent its closure, the line was given a last-minute reprieve. Whether this is permanent or not, the 70-odd miles of iron road that spans the Pennines from Settle to Carlisle is for the moment saved and open for all to enjoy. Traversing as it does some of England's finest countryside, the line offers the passenger panoramic views over vast tracts of unspoilt moorland and tantalising glimpses of secluded valleys on its glorious journey from the Vale of the Ribble northwards to the Eden Vale. Weather permitting, the lucky passenger may even glimpse the towering fells of the Lakelands away in the distant west. The line is truly a visual feast for rail enthusiast and casual traveller alike. The Settle-Carlisle was born well over 100 years ago amidst a storm of controversy, and its construction marked the end of the great railway boom of the second half of the 19th century. The company responsible for its creation was the Great Midland Railway Company, based in the heart of industrial England with its headquarters in Derby. By the 1860s, the Midland system spanned the country from York to Bristol. On October 1st, 1868, the Midland Railway Company opened St Pancras Station in London, thus creating a southern railhead for the newly completed Midland-London extension line, which gave the company its own much-needed link to the capital. Meanwhile, plans were already in hand to achieve the Midland's ultimate goal, its own London to Scotland direct service. In order to achieve this, the Midland would have to construct a new line from Settle northward to Carlisle, linking its own network with the existing Glasgow and South Western Railway's line to Glasgow, and also the Waverley line to Edinburgh, thus giving the Midland its own prestigious London-Scottish service. The Midland's northern railhead was at the time at Ingleton, after which its own Scottish-bound passenger and freight traffic was at the mercy of the Midland's main rival, the London and North Western Railway. So it was that in the early 1860s, James Allport, Midland's general manager, conferred with his board of directors at their Derby headquarters and appointed a young engineer, a Mr. Sharland, to survey a possible route northwards towards Carlisle. The only viable course for a railway would involve travelling via Settle, up over the barren heights of the Pennines, and then down again to the lush pastures and relatively easy passage of the Eden Valley toward Carlisle. The cost of this audacious route was estimated to be £30,000 per mile, totalling over £2 million for the entire line, a phenomenal sum in those days and a taxing burden even for the wealthy Midland Railway Company. However, the London and North Western Railway, seeing how determined the Midland were to have their own route north, and fearing the loss of traffic on their own existing Lancaster to Carlisle line, decided that compromise would be the best course and sought to come to an agreement with the Midland on the joint working of the Lancaster-Carlisle line. The Midland, fearing the high cost of the Settle line, were happy to be wooed by the London and North Western, and in January 1868, having completed only initial contractors' estimates and surveying work, the Midland Board suspended all further works. In order to abandon the Settle-Carlisle, the Midland had to reapply to Parliament for an abandonment bill. Parliament, under pressure from the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway and the North British Railway, both of whom had planned their own economic survival around the construction of the Settle-Carlisle line, determined to set an example for future railway speculators. And in the spring of 1869, Parliament rejected the abandonment bill, insisting that the original act be enforced. Thus, the Settle-Carlisle Railway was truly born, the last great navvy-built line of the railway age, and born with the title, the line that should never have been built. and the late 1869 saw an invading army of navvies descend on the High Pennines. The line required the navvies to assist the engineers in some of the most demanding engineering feats of any British railway. The 72-mile section having some 22 viaducts and 14 tunnels. Work on the line was split into 4 separate contracts for which tenders from contractors had been invited. Contract 1, Settle Junction to Denthead. Contract 2, Denthead to Kirkby Stephen. Contract 3, Smardale to Crowdundle. And Contract 4, Crowdundle to Durham Hill in Carlisle. The most difficult section was undoubtedly that of the first contract, which required the construction of a constant gradient, and the building of the glorious Ribblehead Viaduct, the longest on the line. Early in 1870, construction work on contract number 1 was started. The Lancaster Guardian of the day published the following description of the trades involved in construction. A list of head and hand workers connected with railway making may be interesting to the curious. Directors, engineer-in-chief, resident engineers, contractors and subcontractors, inspectors, clerks, cashiers, gangers, timekeepers, masons, bricklayers, masons and brickmakers, labourers, carpenters, minders, plate layers, horsekeepers, engine drivers, stokers, tippers, saddlers, mechanics, sawyers, quarrymen, cement burners, mortar grinders, engine tenders and navvies. Navvies flooded into the area from all over the country, and some local people abandoned their small holdings to the care of their families in order to supplement their meagre livings with navvies' wages. The pay, averaging 10 shillings a day, was not a bad sum in those days. Shanty towns were erected for the navvies along the track. Their names, like the navvies themselves, ranged the world: Salt Lake City, Inkerman and Belgravia, to name but a few. The largest of these settlements was at Batty Green, site of the great Ribblehead Viaduct. Here, at the height of construction, some 2,000 men, women and children were gathered. Again, the Lancaster Guardian supplies us with a first-hand account of the day. Making one's way to Batty Green, one could not but look with astonishment at the numerous huts which dot the moor. All is life and bustle at this moorland town of huts, potters' carts, traps and horses for hire, drapers' carts, milk carts, greengrocers' carts, butchers' carts, bakers' carts and brewers' drays, in addition to which may be seen numerous pedestrian hawkers plying from hut to hut their different trades. Another contemporary account taken from Wildman's Almanac gives us an idea of the wildness of the area. Batty Green is a very wild and bleak spot. The wind up the Ingleton Valley is of the most piercing nature, and on many days the bricklayers on the viaduct have been unable to work from fear of being blown off. The labouring army was pitted not only against the raging elements of the bleak moorland, but also against the unyielding bog and boulder clay that made up the terrain. The bog defied the use of ordinary carts, so a bog cart was devised which, instead of running on narrow-rimmed wheels, used barrels to spread the weight and prevent the cart from sinking into the sponge-like bog. The bog also presented construction problems. Holes appeared that no amount of filling could make solid. What should have been a simple embankment at Dandry Mire had in fact to become a viaduct. At Intake Bank, a whole year was spent tipping fill into the bog without the embankment growing a single foot in height. The boulder clay was another matter entirely. When dry, it was so hard it had to be drilled and blasted, yet the moment it became wet, it was transformed into a thick, sticky slime that pick and shovel could barely shift. Then there were the tunnels. This contemporary account, again from the Lancaster Guardian, describes working conditions in the tunnels. No person can walk in the tunnel for an hour or more and listen to the thundering reports and reverberations of blasting, see the miners wielding with terrible force their sledgehammers when drilling the hard rock, and breathe the thick smoke of the exploded dynamite without feeling sympathy for those employed in such mining operations, and of seeing what a privilege it is to travel by rail at the rate of a penny a mile. Bill Mitchell, the man who coined the phrase Settle-Carlitis, has had a long association with the line. He has written several books about its history.
There was no special engineering problem once you decided on the gradient of 1 in 100. But really some of these viaducts are marvellous constructions. I'm thinking particularly of the one at Stainforth, because there the engineers had got to make a skew bridge. In this case it was going at an angle in relation to the river, and so you got a rising gradient of 1 in 100, and you got the thing skew to the river, and all the piers had got to be designed with that in mind. And so, I mean, the sort of thing that people would now need a computer to work on were done as a matter of course during the building of the Settle-Carlisle line. The thing about the line is that it's in 3 main sections. You've got a lovely stretch up the Ribble Valley, which is right along the edge of the largest outcrop of limestone in Britain. So you get a kind of grey countryside for a while. And then you've got this boggy, high Pennine bit in the middle. That's Chewett country, and Chewetts are lapwings to the Pennine folk. And then you enter the Vale of Eden, and it's almost like the Garden of Eden, I suppose, after the high fells. You come down into Eden Vale, and there the outcropping rock is a lovely, rosy, new red sandstone. And so whereas right at the southern end of the line you've got kind of hard gritstone becoming a kind of dark limestone, up in the Eden Valley everything's rosy red. And that takes you right up until you get the whiff of the sea at Carlisle. And so you get variety as well. I think one of the strangest experiences is to walk across some boggy area, say around Ribble Head, going up towards Aysgill. You're among the wild elements, your feet are wet through from the bogs, and then suddenly you see a train crossing the scene. And inside are sophisticated looking people, some of them actually having refreshments and others reading, and being conveyed through this very primeval landscape. And it's the contrast between your own rather damp state and their comfortable state that is noticeable at the time. My own personal favourite among the viaducts is Arton Gill. It's much higher, and it's across a wild little gill, and the piers rest upon a particularly dark type of limestone which was called Dent marble. And there's something about that viaduct which really testifies to the Victorian flair for doing things well.
In many respects, the Settle-Carlisle line is a monument to the men who built the railway, battling against the elements as they forged the line across some of England's wildest landscapes. As F.S. Williams, a contemporary railway chronicler of the day, wrote, "However great the obstacle that lay in their path, the engineers had simply one of 4 courses to take: to go over it, or to go under it, or to go round it, or to go through it. Go they must." This determination cost a great deal in human life, and it was not just the men who died. Here at Chapel le Dale, nearest consecrated ground to Batty Green, where many of the deaths occurred, lie the graves of men, women and children who lost their lives during the line's construction. Accidents were not the only cause of death, and many of the infant mortalities were caused by smallpox and cholera outbreaks. This commemorative plaque was erected by the navvies, who raised the costs of it by holding fundraising dances. In the spring of 1875, 5.5 years after construction work began, the line was open to freight traffic. The heavy work completed, there only remained line-side work to finish, and for the first time goods trains bedded down the line. The line opened to regular passenger traffic on May the 1st, 1876, a triumphal feat for the Midland Railway and for those that built the course. And on the opening of the passenger service, the Midland were proud to announce that the celebrated Pullman cars will run from London to Scotland, so that at night passengers will be able to rest at one terminus and alight refreshed at the other in the morning. The opening of the St Pancras Scotland route kept the Midland in the forefront of the competitive railway market. Though never the fastest route to Scotland, with a journey time of 10.5 hours, the Midland and its Scottish allies prided themselves on high standards of passenger comfort and the outstanding scenic appeal of the line. Economically, they also provided a direct link between the industrial cities of the Midlands, the north, and the fast-expanding industrial centres of Scotland. Many railwaymen have worked their time on the Settle-Carlisle. To them, it's a family line, forging close links between them. George Horner has now retired after 37 years of service to British Rail, 35 of those years on the Settle-Carlisle. Though his last job was as station master at Horton Ribblesdale, he spent many years in the signal box at Bleemore Tunnel.
It's very wild up here, but it can also be very beautiful. When a chap came up here from the lower down country to take up an inspector's job here, you see, and he came round one very beautiful morning to look round his new estate, and he arrived at Bleemore signal box, and I was on duty. And he said, by Jove, he said, it's lovely up here. He said, I've often heard of this place, but he said, I've never been before. Oh, well, I said, no, it's all right this morning, but it can be, it can just change very different, you know. Oh, he said, you're all alike, you lads. He said, you don't think there's any other railway, only this. He said, it's just the same as any other railway. Oh, I said, all right. So it took about 3 years to get him. About 3 years later, he came up on the snow ploughs. And I was down at Horton then. I'd moved from Bleemore, and he came into the box at Horton, and he said, I've never in my life seen such a so-and-so place ever. No, I said, just same as any other railway. Shut your mouth, he said, I know what I said. He said, the chap can change his mind, can't he? there's a story here that will have to be told. It's been told in several books, but it was told to me personally by the bloke that actually said it. He was the ganger on the railway here, and he was always one for telling us a tall story, and he could tell them so serious, you know. Old George Cockle, we called him. And he says, oh, he said, I remember the time, he said, when I was crossing the viaduct one morning, he said, looking the road. He said it was blowing a howling gale. He said, you know, he said, it took me hat clean off my head. He said, it went over the wall of the viaduct. He said, it went underneath, and it come back up to the side, and it landed back on my head. He said, it was the wrong way round, you understand, but he said, I thought it was quite remarkable. I was going to Settle-Carlisle one morning, walking up from Horton, and it was winter time, and it had been snowing, and it still was. Pretty calm, but it was snowing. So I walked up to Settle-Carlisle, and when I got to Settle-Carlisle village to turn up the signal box, there was this fellow walking up in front of us, you see. And I thought, well, it'll be the old botanist. He lived fairly local, and he was out all hands day and night to look at the behaviour of plants under varying conditions. Anyway, he went up, this fella, and then he suddenly went up over the railway and went out of sight. I never took no notice of him till I realised that although he'd walked through new fallen snow, there were no footprints. There must be an answer to that somewhere. Now, I still leave an open mind on that, but it made me hair stand on end at the time. This is the Carlisle Leeds. Slowing down for the single line, you see.
Derek Soames, another long-serving railman with British Rail, still works the signals at Settle Junction. Derek is another witness to the vagaries of the line.
Well, when I started on the railway, we were known as common carriers. We carried everything. It didn't matter what it was. And being out in the country, you got the farmers was wanting to send things to market. You may get a newborn calf and it wanted to go to market. Well, they used to put it in a sack with its head out, and they used to take it to the nearest station and put it on the train, and wherever the auction mart was at, we used to have a big truck there with wicker basket work. We used to unload them onto the basket, and they were transported then to the local auction mart. And it was same with sheep and things like that. If an odd sheep to go, he used to just tie it up in a gar's van and send it. Well, this was a goat that came all the way from St Ives, and it landed at Long Preston. This was back in the 1950s. Well, the poor thing had travelled all the way, and the farmer it was for lived a long way off and he hadn't a telephone in, and the goat had never been milked. So the station master asked me if I would milk the goat, well, to relieve it, really. I mean, the poor thing was in agony. So we took a pint of milk out of it. Nobody fancied a pint of milk, so I drank the milk as well. Well, the type of things have changed a lot, because we used to carry a tremendous lot of animals, and then farmers started. At first, you get a farmer, he'd buy himself a little van, and that would get him to auction. And then you got more of the road cattle transporters, and they used to go around all the farms picking the animals up for them. And it just gradually dropped off and dropped off. When it used to be a local show day, the horses used to come, horse boxes, and they all had to be cleaned out while the show was on, and to be disinfected out, sawdusted out again, ready for them going back again at night. I started under a station master called John Banks, and the station master in those days, he was somebody. He was looked up to, because the station was the most important part of the town, because people travelled by train in those days. And when he died, he was buried in Settle churchyard. And if you look there now, it says John Banks, station master. It was something to be proud of. I mean, it gets into your blood. I mean, I've no family. I had no family on the railway before me. It's just I'm the only one. I've no family. None of my own family have followed on into the railway. But as I say, if I can manage 50 years on it, it'll be. I'll be proud of it.
Over the years, the line has had its fair share of accidents, as might be expected on a track with such steep gradients and exposed as it is to wind and snow alike. David Joy, also a sufferer of settle-carlitis, is well versed in the history of accidents on the line.
The first major accident on the line was here at Garsdale on Christmas Eve 1910, when the signalman was very busy. He was having a busy night because of engines which had assisted trains up the banks either side of the line, and two of those engines had been turned on the turntable, ready to go back to Carlisle, and they were actually standing just behind me at the platform, and the signalman then turned to other matters and actually forgot that they were here. And about 10 minutes later, he pulled off all his signals for a down express heading north. These two engines puffed gradually away towards Aysgill, and then only about a minute or two later, this down express roared through, heading north about 60 miles an hour, charged over the viaducts and into the tunnel, and just at the far side of Moorcock Tunnel, the down express collided with these two light engines, knocking them off the rails. The coaches all sort of piled up behind the engines, and sadly they were gaslit, and fire broke out almost instantaneously in one great explosion, and in that tangled, charred wreckage, 6 people died horribly on a wild Pennine night. It was a very nasty accident indeed in that sense. The sad thing is that the second accident came less than 3 years later, which very much dented the confidence of the travelling public in this line. This happened a little bit further north at the actual summit at Aysgill, and was due to different reasons. In fact, partly the reason was the poor coal that the Midland Railway was then using at Carlisle. And it had 2 expresses coming south in the middle of the night. The first express was steaming very badly, and just before the summit it stalled. And the second express was having similar problems, and the driver and fireman were so preoccupied with trying to keep up steam that they overran signals and collided with the back of the first express just short of the summit. That was an even worse tragedy in terms of human life, with 13 people being killed. Yes, not all accidents were sort of interlaced with tragedy. There was one which had more comedy about it, and that was the occasion when an engine was being turned on the turntable just around the corner here, ready to go back to Carlisle. And again, it was a typically wild Pennine night, and the wind was blowing so strong it sent the engine spinning out of control round and round the turntable. I thought for many years that this was yet another Settle-Carlisle legend, and then the telegram came to light from Garsdale Station to Midland headquarters at Derby, reading something like, "Engine out of control on turntable, stop. Request instructions, stop." And there must, I think, have been a great deal of head scratching at Derby before the reply came back, pour gravel into turntable pit. And that's what they did. They shoveled lots of gravel into the well of the turntable, and eventually this engine, spinning round and round like a spinning wheel on the turntable, was brought to a stop. And to prevent this ever happening again, this famous stockade was built round the turntable to keep the wind off the engines, and that remained right up until the turntable went out of use in the late 1950s. The weather can be quite appalling, not just on the wet Pennine nights when the accidents took place, but also in the winter months. It's some years since there was a really bad winter, but one does think back to the winters of 1963 and 1947 especially, when the line was closed for 8 weeks. From early February to April, this line was completely blocked by big snowdrifts, especially at Dent, and up here from Ace Gill. And it seems incredible to imagine men digging down through the snow and they hit something metallic, and that was actually the chimney of a locomotive buried in a snowdrift. I mean, it was as bad as that.
And so we come to what is perhaps the climax of this film, a journey along the line itself, celebrating the Settle-Carlisle's recent reprieve. But this is no one-off special trip on a museum line. This is a journey on a working railway through some of our finest scenery and a ride that anyone may enjoy.
In the year of '69 they planned to run a train from Settle to Carlisle all across the mountain range. They employed 3,000 navvies to build this mighty road, and across the fells through Appleby that old steam engine roll. And it's up in the morning, lads, in wind, snow and hail. Oh, fast your hammers, lads, and lay another rail. It's 72 miles from Settle to Carlisle, across the roughest country, boys, in the British Isles. They said it would take 4 years, but it took them nearer 7. And the first 20 miles sent 400 men to heaven. And it's up in the morning, lads, in wind, snow and hail. Hold fast to your hammers, lads, and lay another rail. They set up shanty towns to protect them from the cold. Ancum and Sebastopol and Batty Whitehall. And when they tired of women and the drinking of strong beer, they fought Burfish style and they came from far and near. And it's up in the morning, lads, in wind, snow and hail. Hold fast to your hammers, lads, and lay another rail. And when the winter came, it froze them to the floor. It blew them off the viaducts and it filled them on Blaymore. Some died of the smallpox and some of cholera. Old Chapel and St. Leonard's, as many buried there. And it's up in the morning, lads, in wind, snow and hail. Hold fast to your hammers, lads, and lay another rail. So if you ride this famous line across those heathered fells, when crossing Ribblehead Viaduct, remember the tale I tell. There's Malice, Stang and Dayskill and the Dendale's lovely wilds, and navvy lads are slaving from Settle to Carlisle. And it's up in the morning, lads, in wind, snow and hail. Hold fast to your hammers, lads, and lay another rail. And it's up in the morning, lads, in wind, snow and hail. Hold fast to your hammers, lads, and lay another rail. Atherstone, a pack horse track, came before Boyle Steam. But Brassy Lock and Stevenson realized the dream and made an iron network that covered all the land and opened up old England for every common man. And I long to hear that old steam train as I come down that rusty iron road. I long to hear that old steam train as I come rambling home. Turnpike truss on old canals, poets side by side, fought every inch of new laid track that scarred the countryside. Some call them mad and even bad, and many bets were made. But by the year of 49, 5,000 miles were laid, and I long to hear that old steam train as I come down that rusty iron road. I long to hear that old steam train as I come rambling home. They opened up that Woodhead Run, the directors wine and dine. They bridged the Kent and Leven through the Scottish pines. The navvies with their fancy clothes made a way through Shap and battled up to Ribblehead and through the Pennine Gaps. And I long to hear that old steam train as I come down that rusty iron road. I long to hear that old steam train as I come rambling home. A railway man had bread for life, the slice is always thin. It's pretty rough at Garsdale when the winter snow sets in. The winds can rage and stop the freights that run to Malastane and blow the mail train off the lines for the Barrow breakdown gang. And I long to hear that old steam train as I come down that rusty iron road. I long to hear that old steam train as I come rambling home. Now you see the diesels everywhere, this is the age of space. Temperamental woman like steam couldn't stand the pace. The navvies died in hundreds, and from their sweat there came a breed of hardy railway men on the long track to fame. And I long to hear that old steam train as I come down that rusty iron road. I long to hear that old steam train as I come rambling home. Going home, riding on the steam train, going home, riding on the steam train.
And so we come to Journey's End, here at Carlisle Station, better known as Carlisle Citadel, the point where 120 years ago the Midland finally met with 6 other railway operators, the Caledonian, the Glasgow and South Western, the London and North Western, the Maryport and Carlisle, the North British and the North Eastern companies. Today the line is of great importance to the local business community. Ruth Annison of Outhwaite's The Ropemakers explains.
The significant factor for us in terms of the Settle-Carlisle Railway has been that 8 stations reopened in 1986, and one of those stations was our local station at Garsdale, so that for the first time since we moved here 14 years ago, we found we had a connection to the national rail network through the Settle-Carlisle Railway and the trains that ran on it. Certainly what we've proved is its importance as a living transport system to the area through which it runs. 2 towns 20 miles apart may not sound very distant from each other, but in fact the geography of this area, the mountainous terrain, may mean that you have no routine dealings with each other, but the railway line is a link between communities, and it's been extremely helpful in bringing people together who didn't know each other, who could work together for the common good. That's why we feel the Settle-Carlisle Railway is so important to us. It's not merely an entertainment or a transport link, it's a very significant feature of the development of the economy in the years ahead.
Well, the role of the Friends train changed significantly in 1989 when the line was reprieved from closure by the Secretary of State, who said at the time that it was a point of reprieving the line, but he looked for all interested parties to work together to secure the line's long-term future. And the Friends achieved this by reforming in 1990 to a monitor user group. And an example of the cooperation with various local authorities, including the Yorkshire Dales National Park, Cumbria County Council and North Yorkshire County Council, and English Heritage, was to restore Ribblehead Viaduct at a cost slightly in excess of £2 million. And from then on, since 1990, we've achieved a number of other projects. The projects included the raising of the platforms at Settle Station and recovering them, and relocating a Midland-style footbridge from Drem in Scotland and reposition it at Settle, and to build a water tower here at Appleby, and shortly to build one at Kirby Stephen. Again in 1990, it was a significant year for the line because it gained conservation status, which means that from Hellifield right through to Carlisle, including the station, it was deemed a conservation area and therefore attracted a lot of grant funding from various funding bodies such as Rural Development Commission, etc., etc. And that pointed major capital investment into the line. And I would like to mention that British Rail, or Regional Railways North East as we're now known, train operating company, has made a massive capital injection of 8 Class 156 super sprinters to replace the ageing local haul trains. Well, these 156 super sprinter trains have helped to assist growth potential on the Leeds Settle-Carlisle line, and there is enormous growth now for the service to be extended to Scotland, which is one of our original objectives. The objectives now of the Friends is to secure regular freight traffic, and that has just started last year, running from Drax Power Station to Kirby Thor in Cumbria, and the second diagram is about to start. Well, Ribblehead Viaduct is the largest viaduct on the line, consists of 24 arches, and work commenced in March 1990 at the southern end of the viaduct. Very few problems were encountered. The expected problems did occur on the King arches, which are the ones with a double wall thickness, and pointing, filling them with grout, all the norm, until we got almost to the other end, to the northern end, to the last 6 arches, because it was done in stages like the Settle-Carlisle line. It was built in blocks, and they did 6 arches at a time, and the final 6 were a real problem. They were twisted, they were out of alignment, the masonry was falling apart, and English Heritage kindly came to the rescue because those 6 arches cost almost £0.6 million.
If you take the structure in what we found, then 1 to 6, I would say, was rather better than most. 6 to 12 was definitely the worst. They've taken the most grout in filling terms. Pier 7 was the worst of the lot.
Really?
Pier 7 and 11, I think, I would say are the worst. But our sort of second best group would be 12 to 18, and then they're not bad at the far end, 18 to 24, but there's a preponderance of rather silty stone in those that requires replacing. When we opened it up to do the waterproofing, the first thing we noticed is that the deck, I think, was much better than we anticipated. The waterproofing was suspect anyway, it did need doing.
and the ballast was clogged with dirt, so any water that went on the structure couldn't find its way to the outlets anyway, because there was 100 years of silt there. The holes we found were a fair number of holes were, I think, originally there from the supporting timber work when the structure was built, and some of them still had old timbers in them, the original timbers, but others, I think all they did, having finished the structure and removed their equipment, was just saw them off, perhaps in places cap them with some tarry material and call it a day. This structure has a masonry face, and the arches are formed out of brickwork. So you do get a tendency anyway for the materials to actually move relative one to another. Now, what we try and do is we core drill through the stone face and insert stainless steel rods. You can see one here. These in situ are 2.5 meters long, and they're grouted in with a high-strength cementatious mix. The purpose of that is to give some additional tie between the masonry face and the arch, because once the arches separate from the masonry face, what you're left with in effect is probably like having a wall in your garden about 2 foot wide and 30 foot high.
For now, the Settle in Carlisle is still very much alive, both as a monument to the men and the age that conceived and built it, to the steam trains that traversed it, and to the hundreds of thousands of passengers who have travelled along its iron rails. And today, for the regular traveller or the rail enthusiast alike, the line continues, a source of glorious pleasure.